If you've seen my Left 4 Dead video, or at least have seen that it exists on my channel, you'll know I'm a big fan of the game. I especially praised the survival mode for bringing me much enjoyment, despite it being the most repetitive mode on paper, although that repetitiveness did get to me eventually. For me, Back 4 Blood is inspired from Left 4 Dead while being a modernized version of it. Before you raise your pitchforks and torches in the comments, let me explain. They both share a lot of core concepts: 4-player co-op, special enemies amongst the hordes of commons, the multi-stage format of every campaign with safe houses acting as checkpoints, etc. All of this, along with the advertised card system, it felt to me like this game was the result of a one-night stand between Left 4 Dead and something like Deep Rock Galactic. You know, that sounded better in my head. Now that it's been out and I've played it some more outside of the open beta, I want to talk about it. Probably the biggest selling point of Back 4 Blood is the card system, consisting of both cleaner and corruption cards, with more emphasis on the former. This is by far my favorite part about the game. With a couple of exceptions, each card seems like it has a purpose somewhere. It's clear the game wants you to create decks that specialize in a given playstyle, whether it be slow and steady Mr. Mundy, or a crackhead with enough grenades to nuke. The process of unlocking cards is a bit slow and tedious, requiring supply points you get from completing campaign levels. You have to choose from one of 3 given supply lines, meaning you probably have to cycle through a few of them before you get a supply line you actually give one about. There are cosmetics sprinkled in, but thankfully they are very cheap. In terms of how viable many decks are, I honestly can't say much on that. I've not been able to even touch Nightmare difficulty because I'm stuck on Veteran difficulty. Believe me, besides my brain occasionally catching a flight to Brazil when I see a Crusher, I'd like to think I'm a competent gamer. Back 4 Blood is a much slower game pace-wise than Left 4 Dead, something I realized real fast back in the open beta. Unfortunately, not much of the player base has realized this, among other things. I'm currently on Veteran mode, so I've only just dipped my toe into the quote-unquote meta. This means for getting many of your initial cards, you're going to be grinding Rookie difficulty. Personally, I really don't like playing on Rookie because of how much it lets you get away with. Seriously, it's so easy, even Rigby could beat it.
In your face!
Granted, it's nice that it exists because it provides an environment for new players as well as for casuals. Unfortunately, players like me who want a more challenging experience are left with 2 options. Pray the hardest you've ever prayed to RNGesus to match you with players who actually know that you're not supposed to run headfirst into a flock of crows.
To be fair, that's how I'm supposed to.
Bird! A tough fight, but we made it through.
Don't. What about a red exclamation point signifies to you? Yes, run straight at the thing. Okay.
Or you squad up with your friends. By the way, I'm currently looking for people to play with. Add me if you want to play, please. I'm lonely. Point being, if you want to play higher difficulties, you really need a competent group. Just keep that in mind if you're planning on buying the game. What was I talking about? Oh, right, the card system. In a normal campaign, you get a starter card, which is the card at the top of your deck, and then every stage after lets you pick an additional card from the same deck. As you progress, you get stronger, and so do the Ridden, and that's where corruption cards come in. These cards do the same thing, except now to the bad guys. Most of these cards are serviceable at best, a majority of them are just extra stats to either commons or specials. Although the common empowering cards are nice because they make them faster and therefore a bigger threat. A couple of the cards are kind of annoying though, like the Blighted Ridden. When you kill these commons, they leave pools of damaging acid on the ground. In narrow or close quarters, they turn the game into the floor is lava, except it's not fun, and much like elementary school tetherball, it hurts every time you make contact with it. Even if you're not stepping in it, it still slows you to a halt, especially if blighted commons keep trickling in. You can probably be smart about it and bait them into a more favorable position, but that's just an extra layer of slowness in a game where you are already moving pretty sluggishly.
Yep, here it is. Here's the footage right here. This is exactly what I was looking for. Look at this shit. With all this damage I just have to take.
I think the best cards are the challenge cards, where you complete an objective to earn bonus copper at the end of a level, which is used to purchase goodies from the orange box in the safe house. No, not that orange box.
We have, you have some of your own games laying on here. Would you like to talk about some of those?
No, piss off.
Okay.
They provide a neat gimmick that adds a fun twist for a given stage while not getting in the way of the main flow of the level too much. Speaking of copper, that is another major feature in Back 4 Blood. As I said earlier, you use it to buy items at the safe house in between each stage. You can find it scattered around levels and get it from the previously mentioned challenge cards. The Safehouse Shops consist of topping of health and ammo, team-wide upgrades, guns, attachments, grenades, healing items, and utility. Oh my. This is another aspect of the game I enjoy a lot. It encourages some exploration to find copper, which gives you something to do while you're skulking around the level. The shop then gives your team some genuine trade-offs to balance. Are the team upgrades important right now? Is it worth buying a stronger gun when I could buy a healing item, etc. Players can also drop copper for each other, which is a really nice feature. Don't quite have enough for that team upgrade? Ask someone for some spare change and you're good to go. I mean, you could be a selfish bastard and buy that shiny gun and some attachments, or you can go find it in the wilderness like a real man. Guns in Back 4 Blood have a star count that generally represent the power level, with later guns having higher star counts. You can also find attachments while exploring, but you always have the option of being a capitalist scumbag whose entire existence is enabled by the backs of the proletariat. Attachments, I feel, accomplish their goal of making your gun slightly stronger in a specific manner. For example, faster ADS speed making your sniper a slightly better sniper, or increased magazine size making your LMG not so L.
You want penis enlargement?
Though I hate that this game follows the trend of every other shooter, where iron sights make me want to gouge my eyes out, and aiming down sights actually making that a reality with how close you shove your face into them. Oh, also this thing where the sides of your screen get dark on higher zoom scopes?
No, unacceptable.
It makes it harder to see outside the scope without actually making it impossible, so it's just obnoxious. And the scope itself is already 40% of my screen. I don't need more tunnel vision. Something weird with the randomness of guns in both the environment and the shop is that the game wants you to have a dedicated build, many of which revolve around using a specific type of gun. Yet, it is entirely possible that you are stuck with a piece of shit starting weapon that feels like it's been through a couple world wars and then some. This is especially bad with LMG-oriented builds, as safe rooms do not spawn with LMGs, so you can easily go 2 or 3 stages being stuck with an M4. A system where the director spawns guns based on what types of decks players are running could be a potential solution, considering the director controls literally everything in the game, including the enemies. Back 4 Blood's enemies are a mixed bag for me. They're referred to as the Ridden, which sounds like the name of a horror movie starring Nicolas Cage. Basic grunts are prevalent in every stage, making battles with the mutations more difficult. Some corruption cards add traits to commons, like making them explode when you headshot them or setting them ablaze. I like the volatile and armored Ridden because you need to deal with them in specific ways. I already talked about why I dislike the blighted Ridden, and the charred Ridden don't really differ that much. They are essentially a normal common, but now they apply a DOT when they hit you. The mutations themselves are categorized very strangely. It isn't surprising that most people experience Logan Paul color blindness when looking at them. The short version is that there are 3 families of the main mutations: Tallboys, Reekers, and Stingers. Each family has 3 variants: a base variant, a variant similar to the base one with an extra attack, and a variant that does something completely different. There are minor physical differences between all the variants, but in a chaotic fight, it's not nearly enough for players to quickly identify them. This is even worse in darker segments where it is practically impossible to tell certain mutations apart unless they're right in your face. And unless you're using a melee build where you show all the Ridden your machete, you'll be introduced to a Tallboy's machete before you even get to call human resources. Visual variety in the models would have been nice to have anyway. Seeing the same 3 silhouettes gets boring. In gameplay, you can describe mutations with one word: inconsistent. Tallboys sometimes have the damage radius of a CSGO bomb. The recent December patch reduced their attack range, but they're still inconsistent about it sometimes. Another inconsistent part about them is their speed. Sometimes they're normal, and sometimes they cosplay as a fucking NASCAR driver who just found out their sport is slowly dying. None of the Stinger variants can decide whether they have the reaction time of the average League player.
What are you waiting for?
or a goddamn hummingbird. They either stare at you mindlessly or they just flick on you. Stingers specifically are infamous for being unavoidable as soon as they show their rat bastard faces. If they decide to remember that they are enemies made to attack players, they shoot you as soon as they see you, so even if you have the awareness of a Navy SEAL, you're going to get hit at least once. Also, sometimes they act like a TF2 sniper with 200 ping where they nail you around corners.
Yeah, that seems about right.
Wretches used to be awkward to fight where they would just manifest acid at your feet, but with the recent patch, the timing to dodge it feels much better, at least in my experience. I've heard from other players that they can just instantly hit you, so honestly, who fucking knows if the patch really fixed them? Noticing a pattern yet? Reekers are bullet spongy due to the lack of a weak point, making them by far the least satisfying thing to shoot in the game. The idea of an enduring suicide enemy is interesting, but it's executed about as well as the Xbox Kinect.
A train wreck.
The only common way to stagger a Reeker is by shooting it, which, in case you didn't know, makes it easier to explode. No weak point plus a large health pool, and it becomes very difficult to gauge their health, so it's mostly RNG whether or not you kill it without anyone getting leftovers from Joey's World Tour on them. Exploders are much better in this regard. They have a weak point, meaning they can die fast, and when they charge, they have a set detonation timer that cannot be cancelled. So once they Thomas the Tank Engine at you, you know to move, bitch. The thing I probably hate the most about the mutations is that they don't have cooldowns for their abilities. Proper movement becomes kind of irrelevant in certain situations. Dodge the stinger projectile? Well, enjoy getting barraged while you try to kill the rat bastard. Broke a tall boy's kneecaps? Something nice about Left 4 Dead was that once a specialist used their attack, they just turned into a melee bot. You were properly rewarded for avoiding them. That's not something you always get in Back 4 Blood, and I really wish that was the case. Boss mutations are another unique aspect of Back 4 Blood's enemy roster. You've got the Ogre, the Breaker, and the Hag. My favorite out of these definitely has to be the Breaker. His simple yet intense combat loop is a lot of fun to me. He reminds me a lot of the Smasher from Siege's Outbreak event. Good times. Though if he decides to spawn in a horrible spot combined with absolutely cringe corruption cards, I'd rather him end my miserable existence than even attempt to tell him off. The Hag visually I like more than the other Rin, but I wish the strategy to fight it was more creative than have one player kite it around while the rest gangbang its back. They could have done way more with it, for instance having it burrow in and out of the ground. That way it wouldn't be as predictable as a shonen plot. Now originally in my script I talked about the Ogre being problematic in early stages, saying that it and the other bosses shouldn't even spawn in early stages. But to my surprise, they actually removed early boss cards in the patch. Nice one, Turtle Rock. You get a couple points. You'd have more if we could have more than 8 decks at once, or if nighttime didn't mean literal absence of light, or if you made an actually fun PvP mode, but hey, this is a start. What I still need to mention though is the scripted Ogre spawn in Tunnel of Blood. First encounter, you just run past them chucking a pipe bomb if you need to. That doesn't always work for the second encounter later on in the tunnel. I've seen two main strategies here. One is to once again Sonic the Hedgehog past him, and the other is to cheese him. Both of these have problems though. Going back to the theme of inconsistency, you can't always Usain Bolt through with no damage. But cheesing is bad too, because early on you don't have the damage nor the ammo to kill him effectively, sometimes not at all. This sounds familiar. Throw in the fact that you won't be able to shoot most of his weak spots because of the limited line of sight, and it turns into a Borderlands 2 raid boss, where trying to damage it is about as effective as trying to convince people NFTs are worth anything more than a good laugh.
You think it's funny to take screenshots of people's NFTs, huh?
Melee is not an option either, since you can grab players to give them a concussion an NFL player would blush at. The Ogre works great in later stages because as long as you're hitting the weak points, you can kill him within a very reasonable amount of time with the cards and guns you will have. What could be a potential solution is when the Ogre pulls out the gate from the tunnel in the first encounter, have part of it collapse and deal an extremely large amount of damage to him. Now players know that even though like every superhero villain, the Ogre will return, the next encounter will be much more manageable. To prevent cheesing, the tunnel entrance could be changed so that all 4 players are required to progress at the same time, for instance an elevator, and then locking them in there with the Ogre. Sleepers and snitches are welcome additions to the game because they encourage you to be vigilant of your surroundings. Sleepers are found on walls and leap at any player within a short radius.
Did you hear that?
You absolutely have to keep an ear out for their distinct gurgle. It'll probably sound familiar if you've ever had the misfortune at eating at a McDonald's. They have the lowest health in the game, so literally cough on them and they die.
What you say?
Snitches are a bit more complex. Similar to Left 4 Dead's Witch, snitches call a horde if alerted, so your team needs to do one of two things. A, sneak past it, or B,
Let's have a go at it!
if it takes damage or bumps into a player, it rees, summoning everybody subscribed to its OnlyFans. It's important to note that there is a variant of the snitch that will call a horde no matter what you do. They are only present in Act 2 Grave Danger as the finale gimmick, but they can also come from a corruption card. These are both amazing enemies, and I definitely hope to see more Rin like them in the future. I think that's all I really wanted to address with the gameplay. Overall, not the worst experience. I'll be sticking with the game for a while. The card system and the overall emphasis on co-op are what keep me into it, but it's definitely not great either, and it has problems that need to be looked at, notably the mutations. That's about all I have to say. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like.
Don't like that.
Okay. What the fuck is the writing? It's painfully obvious that a lot of these lines were written by just the biggest of boomers. Like, we're talking Borderlands 3 level of bad writing.
Okay, so you saw a corporation that was getting curb stomped by a way bigger and cooler corporation, and you said, I'm going with Team Loser Stash?
Like, you see this big bastard come out of the ground, and fucking Jojo Siwa's over here like, God, the game became like 5 times more enjoyable when I turned off the dialogue, now that I didn't have to hear Evangelo throwing out some cringy one-liner or mom saying fuck for the nth time. No one is going to remember any of these characters, except maybe Hoffman. Hoffman is the only character I actually enjoy listening to because he has an interesting archetype, the conspiracy theorist who was right. I like how seriously he takes himself. The lack of self-awareness makes him pretty funny.
In a lab, a government mind control experiment to control the masses that got out of hand. Of course, they tried to blame foreign powers, but I know the hand of the deep state when I see it.
Jim's okay. The only thing I like about him is that he compares killing Rin to hunting animals. Spout it, really. I mostly play him for sniper perks. But every other character is either generic and forgettable or intolerable, which makes you want to forget them. The same goes for their visual design. It's the epitome of bland. Where did you get your clothes from? The 99-cent store? As for the overall storyline, it's meh. I don't know, it's clearly just there to give some sort of context, go here, do thing, help faceless NPCs, repeat. But like, if you're going to make a story in a zombie game in 2021, you could at least attempt to add some sort of twist to it. Humanity was the real monster. We created the apocalypse. Now, where have I heard that before? Oh yeah, that was the thing in Left 4 Dead. Again, a game is still a game at the end of the day, but I can't help question why Back 4 Blood and other games even have writing teams at this point. They might as well literally just ask their clinically depressed interns to write these stories.
You're lucky you ran into me, the main character. You can tell because I'm strong and I'm quiet, and those are my 2 things. Come on, let's go!
Speaking of story, the setting the game takes place in could have been much more unique. Generic American town. Really? You didn't even try. And I know the developers didn't try because they reuse a couple of stage segments. Wow, that's laziness on par with 10 Chambers. Congrats, guys. Keep in mind that 10 Chambers did this exact same thing in GTFO with a team of 9 people, and that's considered lazy. Compared to a AAA studio with a marginally bigger team, that's just insulting.
So I was getting footage for the segment that I probably am gonna have before this, and I decided to look at the Abomination level, and it looks pretty familiar, wouldn't you say? That's because this part's also reused. Fucking around this corner here is the grocery store where you save the survivors, and then you can see that, like, bar or whatever this is over here on that side, which is also from a couple other levels. And, like, the safe room would be right here for the library. So, yeah, I guess the helicopter just happened to crash in the same exact spot we've been through a few times already, so, Thanks, Troll Rock.
Could they not be bothered to make a couple of extra parts for Evansburg so that at least every level is new to an extent? And no, the story is not an excuse for this. The town isn't fucking real. It could literally be restructured so that the cleaners are always going somewhere different. If they do this again with future campaigns, there's gonna be a problem. But for now, we can only wait and see. Let's see. Is there anything I'm forgetting? Oh yeah, okay. No modding. Painfully generic music that is devoid of emotion. Commons animations have TF2 melee syndrome where they don't line up with when they damage you. Commons are immune to bash when climbing or falling. You can only switch attachments by picking up other ones. Visual enemy design is incredibly generic. Lack of variety in enemy archetypes. No modding. Visual glitches that should not exist. Game-breaking glitches that really should not exist. Took way too long to address the ghost bullet glitch and it still isn't even completely fixed. Screen shaking multiple times during reload animations is obnoxious. I'm not in a fucking Taken sequel. No modding. Turtle Rock went to the Gearbox Software School for balancing a non-competitive PvE game, arbitrarily nerfing builds for high-level play. Zero variation in scripted dialogue for cleaners and NPCs. NPC survivors in Act 2 do nothing but get in the way during combat. Game feels like it wasn't designed with close-quarter segments in mind. The sun blinds you because realism. Using fog to make a stage harder is dumb. No vote kick system to combat trolls or AFKs. Forming a party is clunky. Cosmetic UIs are organized like a drug addict's medicine cabinet. No exclusive full screen option. What the fuck? What? Nonsensical commitment to not having a campaign PvP mode. No modding. And for the love of God, please stop buffing the enemies. Alright, so that's my spiel, or stream of consciousness, if you will.
Ogres!
Let me know what you think about the video and or Back 4 Blood as a whole. I'm interested in what you guys have to say. And video end.
Hello, is my mic working?
No. We can't hear you.
You go fuck yourself.
Okay.
You sound so stupid.
Could say the same about you.